Once you peel back the thin veil of gorgeous graphics and free-to-play games everywhere, video games have definitely been getting a lot more inconsistent in my opinion as a whole. Sure, every now and then a truly exceptional game defies all odds and amazes us all, like Minecraft Baldur's Gate 3 or City Skylines, but all too often are we left truly disappointed by the crock of we're handed. And with so many great examples of games gone wrong over the last decade, I thought now would be a perfect time to take a look at the 7 deadly sins of the video game industry. And no, for once I'm not going to talk about Supercell. So without further ado, let's take a look at the cardinal sins of the game industry. Our first of the 7 sins is pride. Pride, in the sense of being a deadly sin, refers to the feeling of pleasure related to self-worth, which often comes from achievements or possessions. This sin is clearly demonstrated by our friends over at Microsoft, which led to them being very silly billies when it came to their takeover of Minecraft. Instead of accepting that Mojang had pretty much perfected the game, including the basic but effective login system, Microsoft decided that their way was better, which it wasn't. I despise Microsoft's login system, and I don't understand why they force it into all of their games. It's just appalling. Microsoft started with a Mojang account, which eventually turned into a Minecraft account, which turned into a Microsoft Xbox account. When this transition happened, I somehow lost my original account, so I had to buy the game again, and obviously I lost my original username from maybe 2010, 2011, which is quite annoying. Microsoft's pride in their stupid convoluted login systems, Xbox Game Bar, and overestimating their own abilities put them right at the top in the sin of pride. I'm going off on a tangent now, but these issues plague other Microsoft games too, like Forza Horizon 5. The shitty in-game Xbox Microsoft UI mashed into a big mess, all running under Steam, just makes the game so much worse than it has to be. And don't get me started on Microsoft Edge and all the other pointless adware that they still cling on to. Just admit that you're worse at certain things like a game's social system and move on. But Microsoft are just too proud to admit defeat, so they're still forcing players to use their janky, stupid login system wherever possible. Greed. This was definitely the easiest to research, but also the most difficult since there are just so many different game studios which deserve a spot on the list. Nexon Studios wins this one after being fined $9 million for violating South Korea's Act on Consumer Protection in e-commerce. Why? Well, they altered the odds of certain items dropping from in-game purchases without telling anyone. Allegedly in MapleStory, the game that they were fined over, they actually made it impossible for certain items to drop, or near impossible, basically making the case loot box container type thing a complete scam. They've also been fined for similar stuff in the past. Their newest hit game, The First Descendant, is great. I've spent hours playing and it's genuinely really fun. That's the game that's in the background of this. But it wouldn't be a Nexon game without some shockingly expensive microtransactions embedded into the game, such as $50+ skins, a season pass, and a very extensive list of cosmetics. Just like with Supercell, the thing that pains me the most is that the underlying game is great, but their greed has definitely left a sour taste and lack of trust in the mouths of many players. Whether or not Nexon will tone it down on their money-hungry antics in the game is yet to be seen. But I couldn't bring up greed without at least giving a quick mention to EA, Ubisoft, Microsoft again, King, and Nintendo. EA is definitely the worst of the bunch and has the most consistent history for trying to f*** over their players, but these companies are all pioneers of greed in gaming in their own right. Wrath. Wrath is defined as being a strong feeling of hatred or resentment with a desire for vengeance. I think some of you might say I've committed this sin against poor old Supercell. But wrath and anger can come across in very similar ways. Anger is basically wrath but without the desire to seek revenge. And that's why I would say I feel anger towards Supercell but not wrath. I'm not seeking revenge or anything. I'm just a bit angry, it's not too deep. What is deep, on the other hand, is the clear demonstration of this sin by none other than Nintendo. Nintendo makes several of my favourite ever games, and they have so many amazing qualities. They don't really compete with other studios and have simply carved out a space to call their own over the years thanks to having a permanent home on some of the best consoles ever made. But they aren't saints. Nintendo have been extremely litigious in the past, to the point that it's had a big effect on game journalists, musicians, YouTubers, and developers alike. Recently, it appears that they filed a DMCA takedown of a GitHub repo for the crime of allowing people to create fan-made remixes in the game Rhythm Heaven. That's right, not a pirated copy of the original game, not a Switch emulator, nothing like that. A free-to-download fan-developed piece of software for creating fan-made remixes. The specific reason for this takedown was down to sprites and sound effects contained in the repo, but instead of just telling Heaven Studios to replace these assets, GitHub, owned by Microsoft, took down the entire repository as well as all of the forks. This basically meant countless hours of work by the community went down the drain overnight, especially when it was only backed up by GitHub in a lot of cases, and all for the crime of allowing people to see and hear a handful of assets from a game. It's a level editor, for Christ's sake. The developers also had been uploading their software to itch.io, where it was also taken down via DMCA. Ironically, by what is assumed to be Nintendo doing this, they ended up attacking the most committed fans of their own game. No one wins when Nintendo kills off stuff like this. The project was free and the source code was under an MIT license. The developers had no intention of profiting from this level editor at all, yet Nintendo saw it as enough of a threat to take the whole thing down, so thanks Nintendo. Nintendo and copyright notices go together like EA and microtransactions. It's just a match made in heaven. Other notable Nintendo lawsuits and takedowns include Tropic Haze for Yuzu emulator, which was a Nintendo Switch emulator, Blockbuster for making copies of game manuals. This one was quite interesting. So Nintendo was super opposed to the idea that people could rent their games, and they were trying to find a way to get at Blockbuster for doing this, but Blockbuster weren't technically doing anything wrong by renting the game, so the way that they tried to attack Blockbuster was by accusing them of photocopying game manuals, because obviously when you rent these games out, sometimes the manuals would go missing and stuff, so Blockbuster would photocopy the game manual to put it back in, so that, you know, other people that rent the game would know how to play it. Luckily, Nintendo did actually lose this lawsuit, but Blockbuster's gone. Blockbuster's been and gone. Nintendo have also filed DMCA takedowns of over 500 fan-made games. That's in a single span, by the way. Sometimes they just do these batches of mass bans. 500 in a single go. They've done probably thousands, if not tens of thousands over the years. They've also done copyright claims against thousands of YouTube videos, and also takedowns of retro game emulator sites. A lot of the time, if the owner of the game emulator site has actually uploaded cracked versions of any games on Nintendo consoles, Nintendo will also sue them as well. So they don't just do copyright takedowns, they will try to get money out of you as well. I try not to give any advice on this channel, but if I do have any advice for you, it would be do not f with Nintendo, because they can very easily ruin your life. Our next sin, envy, can be seen as the sin of feeling angry or sad as a result of seeing the success of another, which can lead one into wishing to destroy the thing that they're envious of. There's literally no way to bring up envy in gaming without discussing the entire video game industry as a response to the success of Baldur's Gate 3. Developers hopped on Twitter to write stuff like this. Just a quick note, while I was editing this, I did realise this guy actually works for a PR agency. There are game devs who are spouting exactly the same thing though. Please, please, please put some thought into it before you proclaim this as what AAA should be moving forward. 6 years and 400 plus people with insane funding due to the IP have given BG3 a big boost. It's truly unrealistic to expect this on a regular basis. Game studios having public meltdowns over Baldur's Gate 3 being too good have been covered a ton of times, so I'm not going to bore you with all that drama all over again. But it's laughable that many of these people work for AAA studios. Instead of being impressed by the new bar set by the game, they instead decided it would be easier to try to convince players as to why they can't make a game like it. Complete cope and sheer envy on display from some of these guys. Like, sure, if you're a 5-person team, obviously no one's going to expect you to make a game even remotely as deep or detailed because it's simply unrealistic. But a ton of the people in this discussion work on massive AAA titles with gargantuan budgets already. It's just that making an actually good and innovative game which efficiently utilizes a budget is difficult, and making excuses is easy. Anyway, Lust. Lust was a tricky one since it's difficult for an entire company to demonstrate horny behavior, well, unless the game studio happens to be run by a single person who goes by the name YandereDev online. Alex Mahan, also known as YandereDev, has spent God knows how many years working on Yandere Simulator, a stealth action PC game which is based around Ayano Aishi, a maniacal schoolgirl who needs to eliminate any girls she thinks are attracting her senpai's attention. Now, the game itself is weird and certainly not my cup of tea. The game has a habit of presenting some, to put it plainly, disturbing depictions of its characters given their environment. One pretty notorious example of this being the panty shot feature, which acts as a currency in the game. It's pretty weird, and it's not like Alex can say it was someone else's idea, since he's the creator of the thing. But the game is just a side dish to the main. YandereDev has some pretty strong allegations against him, such as having some very inappropriate conversations with a minor, as well as being an all-round creep of the lustful variety. Who would have possibly thought a guy responsible for a game like Yandere Sim might be a creepy fella? Yeah, in summary, between the game and his online activity, it's pretty clear the guy's brain is always thinking about lust. Edging and gooning are definitely as essential as sleeping and eating for this guy. Gluttony. Gluttony is the sin of drinking or eating excessively. Again, a company can't really commit this sin, but the Gluttony Award definitely goes to the CEO of insane, groundbreaking games. Sloth. Sloth is the sin of true laziness. We all experience sloth from time to time, the habit of lacking physical or spiritual effort, but this has historically been argued as not being the same as laziness. For the sake of this video, we'll consider sloth and laziness as effectively meaning the same thing though. I wonder if that's me committing sloth by doing that, I don't really know. Anyway, a perfect example of a company committing the heinous act of sloth is none other than EA. EA's laziness goes far beyond just a single egregious example and is instead a way of life for the company. I mean, they banged out Battlefield 2042 in 15 months, 4 different studios worked on the game and it flopped because it's bad. FIFA. 30 FIFA games, and the last 10 are basically just updates to players and uniforms. It's a complete joke how they can justify charging 50 quid for a game, and then God knows how much more for Ultimate Team, and then rinse and repeat the same thing again and again year after year. No wonder their stock price has been flat since 2018, since FIFA players have finally caught on to that. And with that, thanks for watching.